You just made me waste 30 seconds of my life.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but besides the intros, he also has he also has the Gil Kane alarm for whenever you show a Gil Kane cover, and then a mashup starts to play.
Gil Kane, Eli Katz, right?
Mm. Yeah, for some reason, Graphic Man never got into Gil Kane art.
Okay. What was I just reading about Gil Kane? Something about he thought it was best. Oh! Someone was commenting on. I think it started with Eric Larson and then went over to Arlen Schumer's page on Facebook, where Eric Larson wrote some post, which I didn't see, but I saw it reposted by Arlen, on how he's amazed that the Marvel Captain America, lasted. In terms of, if you look at those early issues, they're really not very good. And everyone generally agreed with him. But I think it was in that whole thing, someone mentioned that Gil Kane eventually took over, I don't know, around issue 10 or so. And Gil Kane said that was his best artwork. I forget who was inking him on that. I can't remember who was inking him. Could have been Woody. But whoever was inking him did a real nice job, and he figured out his sort of modern style of drawing with Captain Marvel. I was like, I never heard Gil Kane say that before. I found that interesting. Not that I've read a ton of Gil Kane interviews or anything.
Gil Kane inked by Dan Atkins.
That was it, yes. Yeah. Dan Atkins, who was Wally Wood's assistant, right?
That I don't know. I'm not.
I think he was at one time. Woody had a lot of assistants. Mm-hmm. Captain Marvel, the green costume Captain Marvel. Mm-hmm.
It's like older comic book artists not comic book artists, comic fans. I noticed when I would have conversation with them, because I didn't read the Marvel stuff, but they always called him Captain Marvel. They always
a lot of people still do.
Different, and it was like I just read it as Marvel, but there was some people that I met. I didn't even know they were fans of comics. But there was a lady in my building who was like, "Oh, I've read comics. I stopped around the 70s, but I really like that Captain Marvel character." And it's like, I never caught that name from anybody else except for a group that's like a specific age who collected comics.
There were people who were fans of the original Captain Marvel and didn't want to call this new guy Captain Marvel. That's what I noticed growing up. He wasn't the real Captain Marvel to them. So being that his, Kree name was Marvel or something like that, they called him Captain Marvel. There are still people who do that to this day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I do refer to Monica Rambeau as the one true Captain Marvel. So
she is my Captain Marvel.
Marvel was his name, right? Yeah, that was his Kree name.
Mm-hmm. But on the cover, did not have the hyphen. So
no, didn't have the two L's either. He was he was always Captain Marvel to me.
Yeah,
but then his civilian identity was Marvel, which wasn't the sneakiest of names. Not like you couldn't figure that out.
The perfect cover. Nobody would go by that name.
No, he actually had a secret identity for a couple of issues in the beginning because he stole a scientist's identity. Philip Lawson. Because he was supposed to infiltrate Cape Canaveral to figure out what the humans were doing in the space race.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. No, the funny thing is, he goes to NASA, and NASA are trying to get to the moon, and the Fantastic Four is already zipping around the galaxy.
Whoops. Marvel.
Fantastic Four always causing trouble out there.
Speaking of Marvel, I bought a Marvel comic this week.
Ooh, what'd you get?
I bought Fantastic Four #7 with the Scott Koblish cover.
Oh, okay.
Because it's got 1,000,000 characters on it.
Oh, nice.
Including on the back, there's Guard, the goalie in space. The hockey goalie in space, I should say. And issue 8 is going to have have the continuation of this cover. With another 500 characters or something on it. But
so that's not the whole thing.
No, this is not the whole thing. There's another, and this is a variant too.
Oh, wow.
77. I guess this is variant number 7. There must be a lot of variants because there's a 7 in the UPC. But Scott posted this on Facebook when he was doing it, when he was able to show it. I thought, that's cool. I'll give it and it wasn't $10 like the Deadpool one was. It was a $6 comic. And I have to say the most surprising thing to me was I actually liked the comic. It was pretty well done. Who did it? The actual comic itself is by all people I haven't heard of. The writer is Ryan North. The artist is Iban Coelho. The color artist is Jesus Bertov. Letters by Joe Caramanga, VCs. He's been around forever. But yeah, it was actually, I enjoy it. It was a good little Fantastic Four story. It wasn't, the story was, the Fantastic Four are moving into Uncle Ben's Aunt Petunia's house.
Mm-hmm.
Why? I don't know. They just were. And I didn't know his Aunt Petunia was an actual person. I always thought it was an expression.
Oh, don't you remember her from the Burn?
From what?
From the John Byrne era.
No, yeah. I don't remember her from the John Byrne era. I barely remember the John Byrne era.
No, Petunia shows up at the Baxter building. Yeah.
I think I read most of the John Byrne era, but maybe not all of it. But I have no memory of the John Byrne era. So
it's a great story. Mm-hmm. A lot of people remember it because there's no villain. The story is called Wendy's Friends, and there's sort of a bunch of little critters who are the personification of fear, but they also protect the city, kind of.
And Johnny Storm's got this biker mustache now.
Why?
He looks like one of the Orange County Choppers guys. I was like, oh, that's a little strange. But in the very beginning, Aunt Petunia's like, oh, glad you guys could come stay as long as you want. I have to leave now. Oh, and by the way, the house is haunted. Okay.
Great Scooby-Doo episode.
Yes. So this is the nutty part too. They start to figure out the house is haunted, and try to figure out what's going on because they're losing their letters. All of a sudden, they can't. They're like, first they can't remember words. They're like, oh, what's that word? And they're like, that's weird. It's like, it's happening to you too. And then they're, Reed Richards figures out, I think we're somehow in our memory losing our letters. So they're saying the alphabet and going, I've only got 23 letters in the alphabet now. And they keep losing letters until what are the last 3 letters they have? D-O-M. And if we double up that O in the middle, what do we get? Doom. So it turns out Dr. Doom is behind them. Is behind the haunting. He's using supernatural and nanobots to do something. I forget what it was. There's a tie-in with a bigger. This story was mostly, in and of itself, but it's also tied into, I guess, some bigger story where Valeria, Dr. Doom's daughter, it says in here, died. I remember Valeria. I don't remember whose daughter she was.
She's Reed and Sue's daughter.
Well, Dr. Doom seems to think it's his daughter, or maybe his niece. I forget. Well, he's very invested in Valyria.
I think she's his goddaughter.
Maybe his goddaughter.
Yeah. Why would Reed and Sue? But the thing is, you remember in the Burn run, Reed and Sue's second child dies in childbirth. And so I think it was during the Mark Quaid run they did some mucky timey-wimey thing, and Doom helped bring the kid back, so now she was alive in the age she was supposed to be.
Okay.
And that's kind of why they allowed Doom to be her godfather.
Well, and I guess in the last story she died, and Reed Richards wasn't able to save her for whatever reason. You know, Reed's like, no, she couldn't be saved. Gave some explanation, which, you know. So then in this, Dr. Doom somehow paralyzes the Fantastic Four. Whatever he's doing to punish the Fantastic Four. Good evening, Comic Rack. And then the back half of the book is Dr. Doom using his time machine to try and save Valyria. And he keeps failing over and over. And like I said, it's a pretty well done comic, but it's funny because, you know, Dr. Doom must be about 80 years old now, the amount of times he tried to save Valyria, but he somehow he didn't age all those endless times he tried to save her. And his ego kept getting in his way, and I forget the roundabout way he came to the conclusion of the book was Dr. Doom, after trying to save Valyria these, 9,000 times and not being able to do it. Don't even ask me the logic because I don't know it. Decided that his only way out of this loop or whatever he was in was to go back to when he started, because he actually tried going all the way back in time and stopping the Fantastic Four from being formed and all this stuff. He could never save Valyria, whatever happened. So he decided he had to go back to the beginning of this particular story and stop himself from keep on going back in time. I didn't get the time travel logic to it. So he went back. So Dr. Doom, of the many, many, many failed attempts, went back to the beginning of the story, or the middle of the story, and somehow sabotaged his own armor so that Sue Richards could take him down, which she did. And that stopped his loop of trying to save Valyria. But it was a well-done comic. Don't ask me to explain Dr. Doom logic. I really didn't get it. But I have to say, for the first Fantastic Four comic I've read in 20 years or something, it was okay.
I may pick it up myself. It sounds good because it sounds like a regular episode of Star Trek. Because at the end, they learn up the time, and then they just fly off into the sunset.
I got it because of the Scott Koblish, hundreds of characters cover, but I enjoyed the story too more than I thought.
Last star on that cover.
I saw your comment, Paulo. Congrats on the new job. Looking forward to see what comics you start picking up.
Yeah, I'm late watching video, so Crack posts a video and you can only watch it 2 or 3 days later. But yeah, I already have a comic earmarked. I'm going to be buying the Fantagraphics hardcover reprinting Joe Manili's Atlas Comics work.
Yeah.
That's going to look great in my library.
Speaking of videos, you know what I realized this week? Mm-hmm. I've been on YouTube making weekly haul videos for just over 9 years. Sometime this year, I'll reach 500 just comic book haul videos, weekly comic book haul videos. And I was like, all the guys who were like doing that when I started are now just about gone. I mean, I don't know, like even Sleepy Reader doesn't do weekly haul videos anymore. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I realized I don't know anyone except maybe Don the Comic Book Junkie who's done more comic book haul videos than me. I'm like, how did that happen? Everybody on YouTube used to have more comic book haul videos on me because I remember when I started. But I'm like, I'm trying to think about it, and I'm like, I don't know anyone who really comic book haul videos of the people I watch are pretty rare these days. I just thought I was like, you know what? I have a lot of comic book haul videos, I realized. And I'm like, who has more? I'm not sure. Like Don the Comic Book Junkie May, just because he's been putting out a lot of dollar book videos. He's been doing it about as long as I have. So he's the only one I can think of who's been continuing doing comic book haul videos. It's a strange thing. King Spoet's in the house, so I'll have to show you. Where is it? I got in the mail this week. King Spoet's Elvis Chicken 2. The Incredible Cluck. And this is Scott. Man, he's had a crazy life. Those of you who know, the Spoets are his punk band. And so this issue is autobiographical. And this issue is the story of the Dildo Queen, who is one of his girlfriends, co-performers in the 90s. So it's the story of him, the Dildo Queen, and the Spoets in the 90s. And it's good stuff. I love slice of life stuff. But wow, this life is so different than my life. Because he's in a punk band in the 90s. He was on a tour with the Mentors. All crazy stuff, sex, drugs, and rock and roll going on in this. And it's just crazy, crazy stuff. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thanks for sending it to me, King Spoet. I'll show you some pages. There's nudity, definitely for adults. There's nudity in it, but this is just him planning out some stuff that's going to happen in the rock and roll world. Oh, and also he was on the episode of Jerry Springer, is it? That Gigi Allen was on and the Mentors were on. In the 90s, his band Spoets were on. Matter of fact, he shows here the ad. He said they actually gave us he's like, Jerry Springer actually gave us a plug on national TV for their album. But who was on it? Gigi Allen was on it. It says right here, Guar was on it. But good. Oh, and it's the story of there's some crazy stuff, and it's the story that we get. I think it's co-written with the Dildo. Yeah, co-written with the Dildo Queen too. I was just gonna say that because we get her story in the beginning, and sometimes there's two voices in the narration. There's King Spoet's voice and the Dildo Queen's voice, and man, she had a life I can't imagine too. I come from a very stable 2-parent household. That wasn't happening to people in the punk scene in the 90s, that's for sure. But good issue. Liked it a lot. Fun stuff. Good cover too. I like that cover. So if anybody, I don't know where you can get this issue. You have to message Scott. But thoroughly enjoyed it. Read it just this afternoon. Oh, and he sent it in an envelope where he drew a portrait of me with 2 spawns. There's me with dolphin spawn. There's dolphin spawn. And over here is furry spawn. And it says 2 spawns, but nice portrait of me too. Dolphin spawn.
Very cool.
Very cool. Good comic. I'm going to show it in next week's comic haul when I make that, but I figured I'd show it here now since it came yesterday after I did my comic book haul. Good stuff. This is issue 2 of Elvis Chicken. And Wilson got it. What was the one comic that's at your comic shop waiting for you?
I think it's a Spider-Man issue. Okay. And I also got a cancellation too. I just remembered. I got an email from them. Them being Midtown Comics is where I get my comics.
Very cool indeed.
They had sent me an email saying that they're removing one of the books from my pull list. I guess it was a miniseries, and I may have gotten one issue from the series, because when I jumped on, it was in the middle of it. So I got an email saying that this is no longer available. I was like, all right, I guess I'm going to have to fill that spot with something. Maybe it'll be Fantastic Four. Who knows?
Yeah. Like I said, it was I enjoyed the issue. Beyond the cover, I was like, it was pretty. What's weird though? The one criticism I have of the art is it's too illustrative for my taste. And what I mean by that is, it's really well drawn and well colored. It's about what you'd expect from a Marvel comic. Very, really well covered. But when I say too illustrative, I mean there's no, especially look at it, there's no focus. What an inker used to do is figure out which points. The inker's job in the storytelling was to figure out what the penciler was doing and figure out what were the most important parts of the story and sort of emphasize them. That was part of the inker's job. He was to, if the thing was big in this panel, he should be more important than the background elements. That's not going on in a lot of Marvel comics, and in this one, where every single element is colored with the exact same emphasis, kind of thing, because there is no inking. There's no thick lines and thin lines. There's all thin lines, and then the colorist is doing the illustrative part. The colorist is giving it volume and shape. But at the same time, like if we look at this, they're building that roof down there. The roof is rendered like with the same amount of color and care and the same lines as the two figures. So it kind of all mushes together onto one level. Despite the fact that everything is rendered with depth, there's no depth to the actual panels. So that I found a little distracting. But it's not like there's this panel right here. There's no depth to that top panel of Reed being, because there's not much foreshortening in it, and the background is as colorful as the foreground. And here's another one. The Thing getting blasted, and the background is as bright as everything. And it has as much the background has as much detail as the blast has tons of detail. The background has tons of detail. That's Annihilus. Annihilus has tons of detail, and Dr. Doom has tons of detail. So it all just kind of mushes together to my eye, because it's just a different world. There's not people making those decisions anymore on what's important for the storytelling. There's Dr. Doom floating in space, and the whole thing is completely flat just because it's all rendered with the same line, and it's all colored with the same care, the same shading. So I found that a little weird. Like it didn't ruin the comic or anything for me, but it made it a little harder to get into.
I think that's the problem. One of the problems with having a lot of it done on the computer, that you can zoom in 400% and spend so much time on a little detail that's going to get overlooked pretty quickly. There's no fault to the artist, but it's one of those things. It's a different storytelling.
Jeff Sebesta has a freeze for that when he's working. He calls that pixel fucking.
Yep.
He's like, I gotta stop pixel fucking so much because, like you said, you zoom into 400%, you get it just perfect, but you're looking at something that's going to be a half an inch square, and it's 12 by 12 on your screen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also, I think these colors might look completely different digitally in terms of their brightness, in terms of their impact. So this might look absolutely fine on the colorist screen. He might be getting the exact effect he wants, but then when it's published and I'm looking at it, it's all kind of, it's not lights beaming in my eyes, so it all just kind of flattens out. Which is weird for something that's so roundly rendered that it flattens out. But often on the page, flat and roundness don't have anything to do with how you render it.
Yep.
It has to do with how it appears.
So the books that are waiting for me is issue 2 of Giant Cock Jew, which we were talking about. Scott.
Oh, I got that one. Hold on. This issue was pretty good. It kind of went about the way you'd expect plot wise, because there's lots of giant monster jokes and people are dying, and there's nudity in this issue too. But then we get introduced to a scientist who's like, I'm going to have to go put on the old suit, aren't I? Yeah. And they're like, you're going to have to pilot the machine. So it's like, I'm going to spoil it for you, but as soon as you read it, you'll I won't show you anything, but when you hear there's a giant monster, and then there's some scientist who has to go pilot the old suit, what are you expecting?
Mm-hmm.
Giant robot.
Yep.
So there'll be some giant robots introduced in this.
Excellent.
Suit. Yeah, to fight the giant. Like it's not really a spoiler because as soon as you read 3 pages in, you'll go, that's the guy who's going to be in the giant robot suit. That character is a trope.
Yep. I'm looking forward to that. And the other book is Superman issue number 4.
Okay.
Superman volume 7.
Wow.
Only 7?
Volume 7.
Only 7.
Because it's just Superman. It's not Adventures of or any of the other.
And that's original Superman, right?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
DC has been having a crisis every year in rebooting the universe so many times that you just can't tell which volume is supposed to be and in what continuity.
Especially since they don't use volume numbers. That makes it even harder.
Mm-hmm. And it still has the tag on it on the top for Dawn of DC. So I'm not sure again, what synergy they're going for there. I haven't read enough of it. And I think Jim Lee just got another promotion.
That's right. Is he, who was
president now?
I forget what.
He's president now.
He's president? Whatever that means.
Yeah, I mean, he's president. He accumulates it with whatever it was that he was doing.
In other words, they don't want to hire a new president. They just want him to do his job plus the president's job.
Or maybe they don't want him to do anything.
Yeah, that Japanese cock monster book is pretty cool. It's fun. I don't know what he does to be. I have no idea what he does.
At this stage, you got to know that it's Warner who are in charge. So whichever Warner executive is chief creative, whatever of Warner Media, the CW.
I have no idea what kind of decisions are being made by the muckety mucks at DC. Just none whatsoever.
You know, Disney ruined everything for everyone. DC was perfectly hiding within Warner's corporate structure for decades.
Yep.
And then Disney has to go and buy Marvel.
Yep.
And all of a sudden they remember, hey, don't we have our own comic book universe? Yeah.
Shouldn't we be making movies like this that make $1 billion?
Well, I want to officially apologize for DC buying Marvel. I don't know if there was a connection, but when I entered Marvel, they went into bankruptcy. By the time I left, they were a multi-million-dollar company that got bought by Disney. I'm not saying I did that, but I was there when it happened. There seems to be a connection.
Disney.
Wait, maybe you need to go to IDW, see if you can save the company.
I don't know. All I know is I went there. They were doing bad. By the time I was done and left, they were doing great.
You make your own decisions about that.
That's right.
I'm just telling you what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I actually got a book by someone I know this week. I was at the comic shop on Wednesday, and I don't think you were there, Wilson. If you know who Darren Sanchez is. Sanchez is his last name, right?
I know that name.
He was an editor at Wizard.
Okay.
I knew him in the late 90s, early 2000s, when we used to have Wizard Marvel softball game. I mean, touch football games. We both played in the football games. So that's where I know him from. And then sometime in the middle aughts, he started working for Marvel. I think he was in their marketing department. I hadn't seen him since the early 2000s, but Wizard used to be in the county I live in. They were over in Pomona, New York. And he also lived, since he were in the county. I didn't know if he was still here since I haven't seen him in 20 years. But he walked into the comic shop. I guess he's still here. And he's been he's got his own marketing company now that, is his one-man show that he does comic book promotional stuff for it. After Hours Press, I think is the name of them. And I know he's published some comics over the years, but saw him in the comic shop. First time I've ever seen him there. First time I've seen him in 20 years. And he goes, "Oh, you see that Plan 59 from Outer Space over there? That's Mike Dolce's." Mike Dolce was another guy who is DOLCE, who used to play in the Wizard Marvel touch football games. And I know he's been putting out, as Darren said, Mike's a real hustler. He's been putting out, he's been putting out comics every now and then fairly steady over the last 20 years. I don't think I've gotten many of them. But my local comic shop happened to have issue 1 and 2 of Plan 59 from Outer Space, where Mike's writing them and who's drawing them. But actually, let's see. The story is Mike Dolce. Story and script, James Massia, and art by Joaquim Gonzalez. And pretty fun stuff. It was, as you might imagine, based on Plan 9 from Outer Space. And they've had all the plans since then trying to wipe out Earth that have failed. So now they're on Plan 59, which is succeeding so far.
I really like that logo.
Yeah.
Again, how the comic industry is so small. I recognize the name, and I'm currently working with Mike on another project altogether.
Okay.
So it's like,
which is it? One of let's see, The Sire. I know he's been doing that one for years. Flesh-eating cheerleaders, The Unwanted, Tales of the Bizarre, Epic Center, Under a Blood Red Moon, and Femme Fatale. There's a bunch of the comics.
Absolutely none of those.
None of those. Let's see. What is the one you're working on?
It's more of a book.
Okay.
So, and I don't even know to announce it because I don't know who you're doing it for. So I'm working for him, and he's working for somebody else.
Okay.
So, once that sees print, I can talk about it. But at the moment, I'm doing pre-press on the stuff.
Yep.
So I'm working on, even though it has art elements in it, it's more of a prose book.
And this one, the art was solid, but not spectacular. Definitely indie art at times. No, you know what's weird about it? Give you a little glimpse of the art. This artist, what's his name? Joaquim Gonzalez. At the fantastical elements, he was really good. Like this shot of this, let me see if I can show it to you here. Of like this shot of this interior spaceship, really nice. And he's got other stuff. When he's doing the fantastical stuff, it's pretty cool. Like that spaceship even is kind of cool. But it's when he does the everyday stuff, like this woman walking down the street looking at her phone and these cars, that it fell down for me. It's kind of like he's good at the fantastical stuff where he can really use his imagination. But in the more grounded stuff, he should have looked at some reference. Because Gus is not really going to like the suits he's got. They're pretty generic and bland. They're not terrible. Like the everyday, like that dress she's got right there ain't much of a dress in terms of fashion. It's okay, but it's not nearly as cool as this fantastic stuff he was drawing. And I'm just of the mind that with just a little bit of reference work, an artist can draw sort of the everyday stuff as nicely as the fantastic stuff, as the out of this world stuff where he makes it like, this guy wearing the tank top. That tank top is just dull. It's like there's nothing interesting about the tank top. I kind of like the way he did some abstract designs in it, but like that suit down there is just kind of I think if he did his normal everyday stuff a little better, it would have made the book better overall. But I liked it. I put the rest of it on my pull list because it was a fun book. Here's issue 2. Oh, my sister's giving me my package that came, which is hand cream. Yeah, let's turn into the hand cream show. I'll show you. I'll show you my Tuscan honey. Tuscan honey Camille Beckman hand cream. This is the stuff right here. Oh, it's got a seal on it. Let's unseal it. Smells real good. I bought some samplers of this and picked out the ones I liked best. Uh-oh, I got to put these away before I use up the hand cream on the lid here. There we go. That's an awful lot of it, but I'll rub it in while we talk. Camille Beckman hand cream. That's the stuff
before you read your comics, make sure you put on the hand cream.
Make sure your hands are soft and delicate so you can turn the pages while feeling them perfectly and not accidentally rip them because you have big calluses all over your hands.
But what will that do to the value of the comics? Will it affect their grading?
I actually had the value of the comics just reminded me. I actually had a discussion a couple weeks ago on one of my Facebook groups where we were discussing what is CGC started noting something as restoration. I forget what it was. Nothing dramatic. The guy was like, there. I think anything you do to restore the comic to its original state is restoration. That's the definition of the word. But people who collect comics don't believe that. They think there's a lot of people who are like, if you clean a comic or press a comic, that's not restoration. I'm like, that's the very definition of the word. To them, CGC should only note it if something is added to the comic, like tape or ink or some kind of patch. I'm like, no. To me, any restoration is restoration.
I think it also comes down to what can be proven that was restored.
Right. I said, what can you imagine? Can you imagine a time where CGC, because like I said, to me, what they're really talking about is, like you said, proven. It's restoration you can prove or not. That's what it comes down to. Because if you remember back in the 70s when they used to restore comics, you couldn't, before infrared lights were everywhere, you couldn't see the color touch-ups. It was undetectable restoration. Is undetectable restoration restoration? I think it is. And who knows what they can detect in the future? Meaning that 10 years from now, if there's some sort of ultraviolet light equivalent that you could wave over a comic and see that it was pressed, I guarantee you CGC is going to note that. They're going to, in their little, they might, I don't know if they'll give it a purple, the dreaded purple label, I think it is, which is the restoration label. But to me, it's all, anytime you're restoring a book back to one of its earlier forms, it's restoration. Suit is not awfully done. Nah, it's not awfully done. You're right. It was okay. But not great drawings. Congratulations, Paulo. The 3 tenors.
Yeah, we have another Portuguese that sketchbook.
But it was like, because I was like, if let's just say they could invent a time machine for a comic in terms of they invent them. It's a, what do we call it? A quantum entanglement time machine where you put a comic book in this machine and it is now quantumly entangled with an earlier version of that comic book. So you can, like a slider on the transporter, you can run through, you can bring it back to its earlier, right off the presses version of that comic and take it out, and now it's in that brand new state. Would that be considered restoration? I got to say yes, but to some people, no.
Is restoration adding or taking away? Because at that point, you're taking away the years.
Right. There's some people who think if you're taking stuff away, it's not restoration. Cleaning a comic book, the matter of fact, the example he gave me is cleaning a comic book is no different than cleaning a car. To which I said, there's a difference to me.
Yeah, the size and what can get wet. Yeah, I guess those comes down to the nuances of what can be proven. You know, it's like, how do you know when a book got married?
Yeah.
To me, it's like, does that just mean the person who was marrying the book together just did not do a good job?
Yeah.
I find the whole CGC in itself its own animal, and it creates its own problems. Recently, I saw what it was equivalent to an ad on TikTok, but it was like a small company that does their own version of slabbing, complaining about an effect that the plastic has on the CGC container, whatever the plastic is made out of, there's a rainbow effect.
Oh, that yes.
That happens to
I've heard people complain about that before.
It has its own actual name.
Yeah.
And it's like, that ruins the book. You can't see the book well. Right. And it's like, well, yeah, if you got a light shining off of it, whatever. But all of a sudden, that's now a problem that was created. And this new company says their plastics don't do that. And but they're not really, you're slabbing it yourself at that point. So they have their own fancy case.
Right.
And it's just like, at that point, you're arguing who has the better bag.
Yeah.
The sealing bag, or if it's made out of whatever plastics. What I do find fascinating, that's a trend that just started, or that was pointed out to me recently, was remarks being done on the plastic of the CGC.
I've heard of that being done, but not a lot. Is it being done more now, or
I never knew about it.
Oh, okay.
One popped up on in my feed that his name escapes me right now. One of the creators of the Ninja Turtles.
Okay. Laird or Eastman?
I think it's Laird, is doing Ninja Turtle ones. And he's going all out. Full color.
I've seen the
turtles right onto the plastic of the CGC.
I thought those were on the comic.
No, not that I was aware of. I know that sometimes they'll do it on the comic.
I assumed they were. I recently saw something with him doing some remarks. But I thought he was doing them with CGC. So that's what led me to believe they were on the comic. But I really didn't pay that close attention to them.
Yeah, the one that I happened to see on, I think, Instagram, it was on the plastic itself. I thought that was interesting. Because now do you put that into its own bag?
Reed Rip Slab Hand Cream. There's a new slot for our game. And I'm keeping my car mint by not cleaning. Me too. I bought my car in 2009. It's a 2009 Civic. I have not cleaned it once ever because I don't want to freaking waste my time cleaning a car. Not that I get it dirty. I mean, I don't eat in it. There's not like some people have their car and there's just stuff stacked all in it. Mine is not. It's just got dust in it. Should we do a Reed Rip and Slab since Tit Goblin mentioned one?
Why not?
Let's see. What do I have here? Oh, we're going to go for June 1976.
That was 5 years old.
Licensed Comics.
What do we got?
Present. Here we go. Planet of the Apes, number 8, Twilight Zone 72, and Space 1999, number 6. I have never owned nor read all 3 of these.
I have read some Planet of the Apes. May not necessarily be that issue. Wow.
Is that a Gil Kane cover on Planet of the Apes?
What was that?
Gil Kane cover?
It looks like Gil Kane.
Yeah.
So Reed Space 1999, Slab Twilight Zone, Rip Planet of the Apes.
Oh, you want to read Space 1999?
Yes.
Okay. I never liked the TV show. So.
Let's see if it's even crazy, if the comic is even crazier than a TV show.
I would read the Twilight Zone because I know I'll get a full story there. The rest, I have a feeling, will be continuing. And I don't want to go looking for those issues.
So, because this Planet of the Apes is a color reprint from the black and white magazine.
Yeah, but I've never read the black and white magazine. So
I would slab Space 1999 because I like that cover so much. I could see looking at that cover.
Who did that cover? That's a pretty good cover.
And unfortunately, I would have to destroy the Planet of the Apes. That That looks like John Byrne's signature, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, he did stuff for Charlton around this time. So he started out there, so that might be Byrne looking at it.
It's hard to see. I can't zoom into it, but yeah. And then as far as a dolphin, I got to put him in space.
Dolphin in space.
Trying to get to the. I replaced the astronaut with the dolphin.
I replace the dolphin takes over from the ape that's being choked.
Then wouldn't they all need to be dolphins?
I want a cave dolphin in Twilight Zone, swinging a hatchet. What would a cave dolphin look like? I now know what a spawn dolphin would look like. Well, let's see. I
think the cave dolphin would look the same, but just have long hair.
Let's see.
So written, penciled, and inked by Byrne, and he also did the watercolors on the cover.
Oh, Space 1999? All right.
So everything's Byrne.
That settles it. I'm going to read Space 1999. I'm going to slab Twilight Zone and rip up Planet of the Apes. I really want to read that Planet of the Apes, but I guess I'm not gonna. But I want to read the Byrne one.
I'm actually kind of proud of myself that I can recognize Byrne's signature from that tiny look.
Cleaning a car guarantees it will get dirty. Let's see.
Exactly.
Conservation versus restoration. Keeping in a bag is clearly conservation, but cleaning it might be too. Yeah, as the dirt is not imbued in the comic, pressing is restoration, no doubt, and a proof problem. Yeah, it's a tough call. Read Apes, Slab TZs, Rip TZ, and Slab Space 1999. I want to read all those. Read Twilight Zone, Slab Space, Rip Apes, Space Dolphin. Let's see. Month of my birth. Read Slab Space 19. Read Twilight Zone. Was he ripping something here? He's reading the Twilight Zone. He's slabbing Space 1999 and ripping the apes. Mother monkey. Space 1999 is actually going on my TV night now. I was never a fan of Space 1999 as a kid. I would love a machine like the one Mr. Jared talked about existed. Yeah, I would stop being afraid of opening classic comics and destroying a piece of history. Yeah. Quantumly entangled with its former states. That's what we need. Mm-hmm. Somehow that makes more sense to me than just a regular time machine.
Essentially indestructible comics.
Yeah, because then you have to be able to quantumly view it by CGC to know if it went through that process.
A permanent 10.0.
But then again, it's like it's just a matter of time before they figure out a way that this book has never been opened. So that could make it, whatever name they're going to call it, a 10.1 unread book. Covers it's never been cracked open.
Yeah, they're using their CGC disentangling the entanglement machine.
So the lotion that I use is from Bath and Body Works. And it's called Hello Beautiful. And so it's 24-hour moisturizer, shea butter, and vitamin E. And it's one that
butter's always good.
It's the one that I like the smell of it, because sometimes the lotion smell is just way too strong. That's like, I can't deal with it, because then I'll smell it the whole day. And it's even if the smell is good, it becomes distracting to me. Yeah. So I'm very selective of what I use.
Actually, the reason I got this one was I bought one of that brand that I liked, and then I noticed they had a sampler. So the sampler had like 6 different hand cream smells in it. So I bought the sampler, and I said, I like these 3, and I ended up buying them. Tuscan Honey was one of those. Glycerin Hand Therapy. And speaking of
moisturizer,
what was that?
I don't use moisturizer.
I do. When I started getting dry skin on my elbows.
Yeah, because we have the way it is in New York with the steam and the heat. The hottest summers are during the winters in New York, so you have to have your windows open while the steam is going on.
New York City apartments are crazy how hot they can get.
Yep.
Because when you're a tenant in a New York City apartment, you usually don't have control of the heat in your apartment, or you often don't.
Right.
So they have to get all of those apartments hot enough, the ones on the bottom, the ones on the top, which usually means they crank the heat way up.
And they're going by 1920 laws about how the apartment needs to be heated enough that you can have the windows open, because it was believed back then that stale air could kill you. So you have to have your window open so the air can come in and out. And because, it's the 1920s, who knows how much air is bad. So you have to be able to have your windows open in the winter while your steam is on. And that's why.
No. You must moisturize.
I don't need to. I'm very greasy.
My wife says paper is notorious for soaking up all your skin oil. Yeah. I've noticed this is true, but wonder if comic pros try to actively avoid this with hand cream. Is it a thing? But you will find, we actually just try to keep the skin oil off the artwork. I use a piece of brown paper. When I'm drawing, I put my hand on it, and I use brown so I can see it. If I use white paper, I don't notice it here. Yeah. But you'll find a lot of artists wear a glove or a half glove. A glove that covers their pinky and here and goes over here. And they draw with that on so they don't get their skin oil all over the page. So I think they're more worried about ruining the art they're working on than their hands.
Yeah, I would constantly wash my hands before I start a project, just to keep everything clean. And sometimes, and then you get lost in the art, and then you move your hands, and it's all charcoal on the side.
Yeah. That's why when I first started using this, in the 90s, I tried using white paper, but I never, just a piece of 8x11 typing paper as it was then before inkjets. But I'd lose it and never know it was gone because it's white paper on white paper.
Yeah.
So the brown paper, at least I'll notice if it isn't there. It's also why those old cast iron radiators are next to windows. Yeah.
Cast iron radiators.
And speaking of Portugal or Brazil, by way of Brazil, I picked up this week, Gatsby. There's a pronunciation guide for the artist's last name.
Yeah, it's Cunha.
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 Yes, Koo, bullet point, EEN, bullet point, YAH. But it's spelled CUNHA, which I never would have got.
Well, that's because in Latin languages, the H doesn't actually correspond to any sound. It's either mute or a modifier to the previous consonant.
Felipe Cunha is a comic book artist born, raised in Brazil. And it's written by Jeremy Holt. No pronunciation guide for his name because Holt is only 4 letters, HOLT. But of course, since I've been about everything Gatsby the last couple of years. This was originally supposed to be released as a series, but then for some reason they didn't get enough sales. I don't know what. They didn't release it as individual issues, so it came out as a graphic novel. And Jeremy Holt is the writer. Felipe Cunha is the artist, and I gotta say, and it's not a Gatsby adaptation. It's sort of them doing their own modern take on Gatsby. And I have to say, I liked it in general. It was pretty well done. But what's funny is I think it's got a young adult. It's got mature readers, but it might be like I think it says young adult because they made them as what is it? When middle-class Singaporean student Lu Zhao is invited to spend a summer on Long Island with his rich cousin Tommy, before attending Columbia University in the fall, his assimilation into the opulent American lifestyle straps him into a collision course fueled by designer drugs, sex, deceit, and murder. Set in present-day Long Island, Gatsby reimagines F. Scott Fitzgerald's classic novel as an LGBTQ-tinged multicultural thriller for the internet age. Pretty good description of it. And what's interesting about it too is in the back we get a little thing, a little editorial from Jeremy Holt, the writer, and from Felipe, the artist. And Jeremy Holt had an action. One of the things that I always found interesting about Gatsby and now Gatsby-inspired works is it's a pretty short novel, but there's so much in it in terms of like themes, and it's very tightly plotted too. And there's so many rich characters and themes in it that's like you can take one part of it and kind of make it your own. And it's like Jeremy Holt latched on to a theme that I didn't even notice existed in Gatsby because it's not something I, related to. But he says, but this is from Jeremy Holt, the writer. As an identical triplet and Korean adoptee, my sense of identity has been an ongoing journey. Imagine that. You're a triplet and you're adopted. That has got to make you have a weird sense of identity. To complicate my internal struggles with external ones, my family moved often due to my father's job as an electrical engineer. Between the years of 1989 to 1999, we made a semblance of a home in 5 different countries. A byproduct of this was the gift of wisdom that my mother dispensed whenever my siblings and I enrolled in a new school. You've got a clean slate, she'd say. This is the time to reinvent yourself and be whoever you wanted to be. Jay Gatsby's ability to craft a persona, lifestyle, and reality from a perfect alchemy of determination and imagination is a captivating pursuit. So that's one of the things in the original Gatsby book. He kind of comes out of nowhere to become this rich guy living in Long Island, all to win the girl. But it's like I never, that was never part of the Gatsby that I noticed, that it was about him creating his own identity. But that's the part that Jeremy Holt latched on to because he had done that himself every time he moved to a new school. So I found that an interesting, it gave me more insight into this version of it than I had actually before. I wish I'd read that at the beginning. I don't have to reread this now with that in mind. But I also read which I think they described. Well, everybody in here is a young adult. They're teenagers. They're probably all around 18. I think they're about to go. Like the one guy's about to go away to college, so they're all around that 18 years old. Which is, I just read an actual prose book a couple months ago called The Radical Gatsby, which was, once again, it took place in the early 90s, and I think it was a young adult book because everybody in there was teenagers too. So it's interesting to see the Gatsby cast kind of much younger, which is a little strange because which actually for the women isn't that far off, because the 2 main women in Gatsby, Daisy and Jordan, were barely above 20. The men were 30. But it's like now and it's also the difference in our age now where you don't, if you're going to write a book about romance for young adult audiences, you can't have a 30-year-old there. That's way too old for a young adult audience. They better be 20 at the oldest. But they a nice job with this. The one criticism managed to make it different enough from Gatsby that it's their own thing, but some of the same stuff is still there too. And there's lots of stuff about identity in this one because, like, that was in Jeremy Holt's wheelhouse. The only criticism I have of it is the same criticism I have of the other one, the Radical, and a couple other Gatsby things I've seen. Is it could have gone one more issue. I don't know if you guys have read the Gatsby or remember it, but the Gatsby is, like I said, it's a fairly short 9 chapters. And once again, I'm going to spoil a 100-year-old book. At the end of chapter 8, Gatsby dies. The whole last chapter is Nick, the main narrator, dealing with everything psychologically and the funeral itself so there's this whole chapter afterwards that kind of wraps up the novel in a very interesting way and in a very satisfying way. I notice a lot of things that adapt Gatsby or do their own version of Gatsby, like end it like right after his death. It like kind of wraps up real quickly after. Like this one has, let's see, there's maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 pages after his death, which really they could have, had a whole other issue wrapping up stuff. But I guess they didn't want to. That's the one little thing that disappointed me. And some of the best stuff in the novel is in that last chapter. Some of the relationships that were going throughout the book sort of climax, or there's a coda to them, there's an ending to them in that last chapter. You don't kind of quite get that satisfying thing with this, but it's a good read. It's a nice, the artwork is pretty cool. Let me make it big so you can see it. Some of the there's just a getting out of the pool shot. Let me get some of the big party scene shots. See if he does some nice work with the architecture at times. And the other weird thing, it's just a big house. Where's some The other weird thing is it ends with a shot because it's also an interesting choice about this. There's no narration. Gatsby, the original book, Nick is our narrator for the whole thing. And in this, there's no captions at all. So there's no narration. So we're not inside of Nick's head at all, even though he's not Nick in this. He's Lu Zhao. But we're not inside his head at all, which is unusual for a Gatsby thing. But what's weird about it, it ends because he's supposed to be going to Columbia. It ends with a shot of a classroom in Columbia University. And I have never seen a classroom in Columbia University, but I don't think it's this. I don't think this artist has ever seen a classroom in Columbia University too. Because the classroom at my local community college looks more like a classroom than this stuff. It's just funny. It's just the blandest classroom you've ever seen. Let me show you. And it just made me go, what? They're just kind of, there's like no architectural detail to anything. They're just sitting in these Kmart chairs. And like I said, I don't know what a classroom in Columbia University looks like, but it's got to look better than that. that just struck me at the very end. I don't know why it made me laugh when it wasn't supposed to, but I'm like, I'm gonna have to find out what a classroom in Columbia University looks like. Maybe he got it right. Maybe he found reference, and that's exactly what it looks like. But he did everything else. He did other things so spectacularly, and the classroom at Columbia University was just like, huh? Was it the last page? And he went, I don't care.
Oh, that thing looks like a driving instruction at the DMV.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good description of it. It looks like you're taking a test at the DMV, and they've got these fold-up desks where you put it with that have the little thing that comes up that you write. That's exactly what it looks like. The driver instruction at the DMV. And a bland white classroom with nothing on the walls. It does not look like I imagine an Ivy School college looks like in a classroom. I just found that kind of funny. Sleepy's here. That's interesting. So many authors, publishers, that's because Gatsby went into the public domain in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, what's funny is he mentions they started this project in 2020. And they were going to call it Ashby. I said, the brief intro, Jeremy sent me a full outline of what was then called Ashby, a young adult retelling of The Great Gatsby. And then he said, we entered production a couple months later, and the first decision we made was to actually name our story Gatsby, which I think they probably named it Ashby because that was they started it before Gatsby became the public domain. And then they were like, oh, and I'm glad they named it Gatsby because I probably would have paid no attention to it if it was Ashby, wouldn't have even noticed. Yeah, but that's the reason why there's so many Gatsby stuff now. There could have been, they could have a Gatsby con. Yeah. Clover Press has a Gatsby adaptation. Yes, that one I bought as it was coming out, and I overspent on the hardcover slipcased edition. That's from Kickstarter. I spent $84 on it. I still can't believe I spent $84. It isn't here yet. It's just being printed. But I was like, when I did it, I came on and told these guys, I was like, I always say I don't do Kickstarters a lot because it's the most expensive way to buy a comics. It just is. It's like, a $5 comic is $15 on Kickstarter because of shipping and all the tchotchkes. I said, I knew that Gatsby was going to be coming out in collected form. And I said, let me check their website. And their website had a Kickstarter for it. And I got all caught up and said, hardcover slipcased edition. I'll get that one. Next thing I know, I'm $84 poorer and went, I could get this on Amazon for $30. Or at least the regular hardcover one, not the slipcase. There's this weird staticky. Yeah, I think Wilson's got a weird staticky echo. I haven't been to Columbia in 40 years, but when I did, it was all old, rather grand buildings. Yeah, I just don't think it looks like the DMV taking a driver's test, as Paulo described. I lived near Columbia in '84. Wow. That's uptown, right, Columbia? Once in the 160s or something.
I think so. I've never been there.
But I sometimes mix it up in my head with NYU, which is all the way downtown.
Right.
But if you're in, but bottom line, get yourself a copy of Gatsby. It was well done. Good comic. I think it was only $20 too. Yeah, $19.99. So you can probably get it for cheaper on Amazon. With a foreword by Billy Porter. Yes, Columbia was on the Upper West Side, kind of Spanish Harlem at the time. Spanish Harlem. The Columbia University and Columbia Hospital are one and the same, right? Columbia, what is it, a medical center? They're in the same spot, right? If I remember correctly. I don't know. I've never been there.
I don't know. I've never been myself.
But I think they are. I think they're both up there. Let's see. What else did I get this week? Ooh, I picked up Don't Spit in the Wind, issue number 2, which this was one I was unsure if I liked it. And I said, I'll get issue 2. Then it turns out it's going to be a 4-issue mini, so I may as well get the next 2 too. But I liked this cover. Let me show you the cover. It's got this weird drawing style. And the comic itself is about these people who are trying to clean up all the trash. It's got some interesting imagery in it too. Trying to clean the earth is a trash dump now, and they're trying to clean it up. Some trash, like this is one of the trash collectors trying to clean up earth. And this issue, and that's all issue 1 was, trash collectors collecting trash. And this, we get a bigger view of the whole sort of planet and other stuff going on. What's the guy's? And this is actually from Mad Cave, but I'd also read as creator owned. Stefano Cardacelli. And I think it was maybe it was Comic Crack who said that this looked weird to him because it looked like art that was small blown up big. And I think it does kind of look like that, but I think he's also using, I don't know if you can see it in there. He's using a lot of those. If you're on social media and you're an artist, you get ads all the time for these brushes for Procreate and Photoshop that make things look like old-timey comics. You know those ones, Wilson, where you can paint in Zipatone and you can paint in line screen? I think the artist is actually doing that. That's why it looks, because you can see the line screen in a lot of it. So I think he's actually using those brushes in either Photoshop or Procreate, where you're trying to make it look like an old-timey comic, but you're trying to see the line screen on it. Like, look at this right here. Let me show you this. Look at that purple. There's definitely line screen texture in that you would just not see in a normal comic. So I think that has to do with making it look like it was blown up, is the particular technique he's using. But I'll buy 2 more issues of it, I decided. Which is why I've complained about this before, I like to know if something is a miniseries or not. Because maybe I don't like this enough to put it on my pull list indefinitely, but I like it enough to buy 4 issues of it, to buy 2 more issues of it. So I'm definitely going to get the last 2 issues. As soon as I see him on final order cutoff, I'll add them. Don't spit in the wind.
Yes, I've seen those brushes before, and I'm almost sure I've gotten them, and they make them for a lot.
Yeah, they make them for everything. Mm-hmm. Yep, that was me. I didn't know it has a 4-issue mini. Yeah, exactly. Now that I know it's a 4-issue mini, I'll stick around. It was Comic Crack who said it looked like the art was blown up. Yeah, I get ads for those brushes all the time. Someday I'll get some, but not today.
Mm-hmm. It looking like it's blown up. It's like I was saying about the Italian comics are made smaller, but those things made by Italians that are coming out in the United States seem to be made specifically for the United States.
Right,
so
that's
why I don't know why they look blown up.
Yeah. That was that. What was that one? Beyond the Beyond. That was the one I was getting last year, I think, that was made in Italy, but it looked like it was made for the United States. Like, if you remember, I'm discussing Carmen by, what's his name?
Guillem March.
Yeah, there we go. Guillem March. It looked to me, in looking at that he was doing it for both markets. he was expanding the artwork a little bit so that it wouldn't be cut off in either market. Which all he had to do, because I think the height was the same. He just had to add like a half an inch of art, I think, down the sides, and then it would be fine for both markets. Like I said, I remember when we were looking at that, when I was buying the issues, that seemed to be what he was doing, because it was printed in Europe first at a different size, and then printed in the US, and there was no, they didn't shrink the art down. There was no, the bleed wasn't short. So he just added more bleed onto it, which I think is a smart idea if you're going to publish in both markets. Just add a little more bleed to the side. It's going to get cut off in the European version, but it doesn't matter because you only put stuff there that you don't care about. It can get cut off. It's not, you don't put the essential stuff in that last half inch. That's all you got to do. I reread something this week that I liked better the second time. This is Andy Watson's The Book Tour. And I don't know what made me reread it, besides I just pulled it off the shelf and I was reading and I glanced at it and I kind of read the end. Maybe someone mentioned it somewhere. But it's got terrific praise. Everybody loved it. It came out in 2020. I probably got it in 2020, Christmas or birthday or something. And I've read other stuff by Andy Watson that I like. And despite the fact that it's Andy with an I, it's a dude. Because I thought, Andy with an I, when I first started following his work, I figured it was a woman. But nope, he just spells Andy with an I. But it's the story of a guy on a book tour, and it's kind of a comedy, but it's very understated comedy. And I think the reason I didn't like it the first, or I don't say I didn't like it, didn't grab me much the first time around, is I think sometimes we're so used to plot being almost the most important element in anything we see, read, hear, whatever. And I'm the same as and even though I'm not always a plot guy, I can be that way too. Which is when I read all my comics for the second time, as I always say, it's a different reading experience the second time because I'm not as involved because I know what the plot is now. So I'm not as involved with the plot. Sometimes I think I think this happens to other people too. I'm almost distracted by the plot sometimes. If I do, because there's barely a plot in this. The plot is he's on a book tour. Things keep going wrong. He can't get in contact with his publisher. He loses his suitcase full of books. First thing. He keeps showing up at these little bookshops, and there are no customers for them to sell books to. He's late to this bookshop. This bookshop didn't advertise. This bookshop had a big signing the day before. But then as it goes on, there starts to be a murder plot because some cops show up, like maybe a quarter of the way, a fifth of the way through the book, pretty early on, to question him. And they're like, "Well, when was the last time you saw her?" And he just doesn't know anything. He's just a guy having a really bad book tour who doesn't really talk very much to begin with. So they start to suspect him of this murder. And then the rest of the book is once again him going on these books. Nothing goes right for him. Every hotel he stays at, his room service isn't taken care of. He can't eat at this hotel. He just missed lunch at this hotel. There's a running theme of him not being able to. He's not well fed, so he's never. He's also not the most personable, talkative guy there. He's finally supposed to have dinner with his publisher so he can straighten some things out. His publisher can't make it, sends the poetry editor who he doesn't even know, who can't help him with anything. He keeps calling his wife back home to talk to her, who he keeps missing his kid. He like, every time he calls his wife, the kid's doing something, the kid's in bed, the kid's in the bath, so he doesn't even get to talk to his kid. He barely gets to talk to his wife sometimes. So it's like there's not really a lot of plot going on in these events. But there's and the comedy is very subtle. But I really liked it a lot better the second time through. I think because I wasn't distracted by their, because you know, when you read anything, you're trying to figure out what you're watching the plot move along. You're like, oh, what's going to happen next is always the big question for you know, for somebody who's watching a TV show. That, oh, I want to see the next episode. I want to see what happens next. With what happens next in this was another mundane thing. So it's kind of like, where's the plot? What's going on? By the end of the book, they arrested him for the murders, and he's still as clueless as ever. It's like he's locked up in jail, and they're not really giving him any information. At one point, they're like, well, since you signed that confession, and he's like, confession? I didn't sign a confession. And then that plot, the book ends as weirdly as it begins, in terms of they just kick him out of jail one day. And this jailer's like, I can't believe you're taking credit for another man's work. There's a word for that. He's like, plagiarism? He's like, no, stealing. So his jailer is even mad at him for not being the killer. So there's a lot of weird, but I liked it better with the plot, not me knowing there's not much of a plot. Me knowing I shouldn't be worrying about the plot at all, because that's not the point of this book. The point is just kind of going on with this Arthur on this weird little journey of, and you're out of control. He's never in control this whole time. Everything happens to him. He's not the agent of anything. And that's us as the readers too. And I think that is why I didn't like it the first time. The main character had no agency, so I as a reader had no agency. But once the second time through reading it, I'm like, well, I know the plot doesn't matter. That neither of us can have any effect on the plot. Like he had no effect on his plot, none whatsoever. But and I think that bothered me when I first read it, but it didn't bother me at all this time, which is why I like to read things twice. But good book. Just read it twice.
Did you discover anything different about it that you didn't spot the first time?
I discovered more humor.
Okay.
It was funnier the second time through, because the humor was so sort of downplayed and subtle that I was so blind. You know, the first time through, I was trying to pay attention to the plot kind of thing, that I think I missed some of the humor. So that was weird. It's a very subtle story, I'd have to say. But like I said, he's not in control of everything. I don't even know what country it takes place in. It must be England, because he's speaking the same language as everyone, and Andy Watson is English. But but all these quaint little towns look nothing like I think a town looks like. So I didn't know. They look like quaint little European towns in Italy or something. The England I've seen, the England, Ireland, and Scotland that I've seen on TV doesn't look like this. This looks more like Italy, or maybe Italy mostly. That's where I see the little villas and little towns. But he has no language problem, so I assume it's England. Oh, you need your mic, Paulo.
Can you show a house so I can? I can trade. Can you show a house so I can try to identify?
Let's see. I just saw there was a scene with a streetcar. Even there's a scene with a streetcar.
Mm-hmm. Well, that could be Portugal.
Yeah, it could be. I was just saying Spain too, maybe. Up there's
we have streetcars like that in Lisbon. Yeah, that looks like a.
It doesn't look like England, right?
No, it doesn't look like England. London, maybe. It's definitely a large town.
I think he went to a few different towns, maybe.
Uh-huh. Yeah, there are places in Germany like that.
Yeah. I was just I thought it might be a European. Oh, this looks like Vienna straight out of The Third Man. Hold on, let me get it bigger. Mm-hmm. This looks like post-war Vienna.
Uh-huh. Could be this
running up the stairs. I've seen that in other movies too. Definitely European. Definitely continental.
It could be the Seine in Paris. Jared?
I think we lost him.
and got kicked out.
There you go.
He got kicked out. But yeah, like it didn't strike me as England, but he had no problem with the language, which made me go, I'm not sure.
Yeah, but it could be a lot. It looks like many different cities. I noticed. One of those places reminds me of a square I was in Leipzig in Germany. The place near the river, not the bridge, but when is running alongside the.
There's a telephone booth.
Yeah, that's pretty standard.
And they also had the public telephone where you hang it up on top.
Okay, I can't remember seeing that.
Yeah, so it's like it just struck me as like continental Europe, rather than England or Scotland or Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was, and he was definitely, not being that he was staying in hotels and had to call his wife. He was not close to home, so. Mm-hmm. But I'm not 100% sure where it was supposed to take. But good, and listen, in his first book for adults in many years, internationally acclaimed cartoonist Andy Watson evokes all the anxieties felt by every writer and compresses them into a comedic gem of a book. Witty, surreal, and sharply observant, the book tour offers a captivating lesson in letting go. Captivating? I think it was me, the reader, who had to let go. I had to let go of my, I guess the whole letting go part. Like I said, he had no agency in this whole. He was just an acorn on the stream, floating down the stream with all these things that happened to him. Huh. Each European city has its own charm, unlike America, where you've seen one McDonald's, you've seen them all.
Yeah, but if you find American young Americans on vacation, they try to find the McDonald's.
It's Sildavia?
Yeah, it's from the Tintin books.
Ah, okay.
It's a fictional country from a Tintin book.
A page-turning, Kafkaesque dark comedy in brilliant retro style. This graphic novel watches one man try to keep it together while everything falls apart. See, that description is kind of doesn't capture like the subtlety. Maybe that's what, because maybe I wasn't expecting the subtlety of it. But good. I'm glad I reread it. It was definitely worth a reread. Definitely worth a reread.
What I've been reading, or what I've been not going back to reading, started to actually read, although I bought this a long time ago, is the Essential Guide to Comic Book Lettering.
Oh, okay. Nate Picos one?
Nate Picos. Yep.
Yeah.
I picked it up
to get that too.
I picked up a while ago. I'm already learning new stuff.
Yeah.
That I'm already incorporating into my lettering. And like shortcuts I wasn't even aware of.
Right.
Because I usually use actions, for those who don't know, in the Adobe products and most of the other programs, you could do actions of mundane stuff that you do all the time. So I do actions mainly for my coloring.
They're also called macros.
Macros. So
where you record yourself doing a series of steps, and then you just hit a button, and it does those series of steps.
And it helps out immensely. And if you go really into it, you can even make it where you can edit the steps as you go along, all types of stuff that helps the process. The good part about that is that you will speed things up. The bad part about that is you rely on it too much, and if you get put in front of a computer that is not your own,
your actions aren't there.
Your actions aren't there. Your palette isn't there. I had gotten into the habit of when I had walking around with my iPod, I would keep all my actions and all my my little programs on there. So it's one of those things where you want to still know what the steps are.
Yeah.
If you have to do them on the fly. So there's a few new actions I'm creating. And again, it's little things that I wasn't aware of. That's the funny thing about Illustrator. I use it 90% of the time for lettering, but I haven't really used it for anything else. So sometimes you'll learn something somewhere else and realize, oh, I could use that in the comic book creation. So reading over the book, and I knew I was going to learn new stuff, but I didn't know that in the middle of it as I'm reading it, it's like, oh, okay, I got to write that down. And I started doing the actions right there and then going, I've been wanting to know how to do that for years and not realizing that it was just a push of a button. I just didn't know where that button was. And that's the infuriating thing because it's like, oh, that's what that meant. I was using this one. I should have used the one right next to it.
Yep.
So going through it, and it's like I'm already making changes. I'm even going to modify my template that I use along with it. So it's like, and again, it's one of those things where, you know, I have this book, I have the one by Comic Craft. Every now and then I'll pull that one out because there will be something that I learned and it's like, but never had to use it again. So I go back and go, oh yeah, how do I do this particular action for a sound effect and stuff like that? So definitely a good book that I highly recommend. It's only $16.99, and I think I picked it up on Amazon.
I've been meaning to get that too. I wanted to put it on my Amazon wish list.
I definitely recommend it. You know, I even page was. Let's see. This is page. Got a sticky on it. So page 86. Had to come back to it just to look at some stuff that I wasn't even aware of. Making compound shapes, and it's like I'm going to go to my old balloons because
that was the second version I think we've talked about before.
I think so. Yeah.
We've had a lettering discussion. I asked him which way he did it, the layers way or the compound shapes way, and he's like compound shapes way, because when he started in lettering, you couldn't do it the compound shapes way.
Exactly. So that's why I ended up going to layering.
Right.
And layering for a while was quick. Right. But there was something always about it that if you weren't paying attention, things would shift.
Right.
And it was so irking, but it was like, this is the way I have to do it. And then when we had that conversation, it was like, all right, let me go back to it. And it was one of those things that I kept in mind. And it was like, all right, let me find it in the book.
Right.
And there's at least 3 or 4 new actions that I created. And again, I don't know if it's going to make anything any faster, but it does make some things a little bit easier. And it's, you know, cutting a few seconds here and there.
2 letterers on my friend list on Facebook were nominated for Eisners for the first time.
Yes.
Who was it? Pat Brousseau, who I don't actually know, but he was a bullpenner just before I was.
Mm-hmm. I knew him through DC. Right. Like I met him the day he was leaving DC Comics.
And Chris Dickey. Did you know him? I didn't even know he was doing lettering. I
didn't either.
But matter of fact, I didn't even notice he lettered this.
I think Nate might have also just been.
Remember, I got this a few months ago. Hardcover graphic novel. Chris Dickey's the letterer on it, and he got nominated for this. So, this was a good book too. I'll reread this.
Todd Klein was also nominated this year as well. Right. Oh, and so was Stan Sakai.
Which reminds me, I wanted to. Did you guys check out that link? Let me share it. Where is present? Share screen. Window. Let's go back to here, but go over to here. This interests me. This is I don't know if you guys read this link.
I went through some of it. I didn't go through the whole thing, but
what I liked, this is, what's his name? Raymond Perry. Who he's got an interesting. He was because Wilson and I are both behind the scenes guys in comics. So was he. He was he was us in 1937. Except he was 57 years old when he got a job in the DC Comics production department. It said he actually had a career as a fine artist, as an illustrator, and then the Great Depression took it all away from him. So just recently they found someone, they describe it in here who it is, I forget who, somehow got all of his papers, somehow, not even in his family. He was like a friend of a friend, ended up with all of this guy's papers from the end of his life. And a couple of the cool things in them were photographs. Here's some of his artwork. Like I said, he was a successful artist. And his papers were these journals with articles. But he has, there's one of his paintings of, who is that by? Al Plastino. So there was a painting. He used to do this sort of drawing at DC too on the top of the text pages. And this is what I thought it was, because this is what I did at 90s at Marvel, take pictures of like people in the bullpen. So there is Jack Schiff, editor. There is Howard Stern's cousin, Jack Adler, who was coloring the covers, amongst other things, at DC in those ages. An accountant at DC, Morris Whitinger. He was one of the production guys, I think it says there. Another accountant, Joe Letteries. He was a staff letterer, office manager. Ira Schapp, who was a staff, he lettered a lot of DC stuff. But I just found it very interesting to see pictures of these guys at work. Because in the 90s, I was the guy who took pictures of people at work at Marvel. So it was like, I just found it really interesting to look through those and think about, there were people doing the same jobs we did in 1938.
Doing it without computers.
Mm-hmm.
Doing the paste of mechanical, so there were more people
on. And I got to do the tail end of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I was Jack Adler there. I know I read an interview with him recently. He actually invented a lot of the coloring techniques and stuff in comics. That his boss, Saul Harrison was at DC, right?
I think so.
Saul Brodsky was at Marvel, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Saul Harrison was Jack Adler's boss, and he liked to take credit for a lot of things that Jack Adler invented. So Jack Adler said so.
Yeah, it was fascinating to look through those photos and see the little notes he took, because they were basically just journals.
Yeah. Interesting. I found that really cool just to see a glimpse into the offices in the past, and it was amazing that guy started at DC in 1938 when he was like 57. Even like he had a whole career as an artist that just went up in smoke during the Great Depression. That's like, oof.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. When I saw those photos, I was thinking, yeah, there was a Jared over there.
Yeah.
Because, again, I mentioned it before on other shows, is that, if you weren't there, I don't think there would have been very much pictures of me at all. There's one Marvel article that has my photos in it, and most of them I'm wearing a Doom mask. So, the one, not Marvel Age, Marvel Vision.
Right.
The interview that I have on there's like an illustrated picture of me and one photo, and I think the rest are either illustrations or the Doctor Doom mask. So it's kind of funny that, except for your pictures and the one that Larry Hama put and shared on Facebook from one of the parties, the Marvel parties, it was like, there wasn't many people doing that at all.
Right.
Because you don't really think about it because you're at work, that kind of a thing. So I'm glad you did take pictures and stuff like that because, there's not much on the Marvel bullpen out there in general.
Right. And there was even fewer people doing that in like the 50s. So it was like, he even said, Todd, he was like, this is the best picture of this person I've seen. This is the best picture of this person I've seen.
Mm-hmm. I'm always trying to look in the background and see what was they hanging on the wall.
Yeah.
Because
I even noted some of that.
Yeah, exactly. Fascinating. And everyone's wearing a suit.
He showed a picture of one guy, I forget his name, who he said in the late 30s, I forget who it was, like the two big bosses and that guy got like arrested for pornography charges or something that had something to do with their publications. I don't know what, but that guy took the rap for it. So he had a job for life from the two bosses. That's in there somewhere. Let me see if I can. But that's like something I had never heard of before.
Yeah, it was somewhere along the line mentioned about, when they print stuff, because they would print men's magazines and anything would be considered porn basically at that time. And
hold on. Let me show you him again because I found him. Present. Share the screen. Window. There we go. This is a nice little tidbit. Herbert Siegel, office manager, factotum, and very good friend. Last three words I underlined. Siegel was a longtime employee of National Comics owners Harry Donenfeld and Jack Leibowitz from the early days as publishers of erotic pulp magazines like Snappy and Spicy Adventure Stories. In 1938, they were indicted by federal prosecutors on pornography charges, and Siegel took the fall for them. The only one convicted. He was fined $250 and given a suspended sentence. The full story is here. From then on, Hervey had a job for life with National Comics, essentially as a go-for, or as Perry said, a factotum to Donenfeld and Leibowitz. Perry's friendship with him suggests he was also a nice man. But I found that incredible. Like, there's a picture of the guy who took the rap for the two bosses. The parts of comic history they don't talk about so much.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Americans always want to feel at home, Paulo. That's why we like those McDonald's. Check McDonald's, no Porto. So.
Old tourists want to try out all the quaint little places. It's when you find young tourists, where's the McDonald's? Because I don't know what to eat.
Right. It may sound weird, but I enjoy eating Chinese food in every European country I visit. I love each country's local interpretation of food I know. At least I think I know. Please explain what you look for in great lettering.
Lettering is a hidden art.
Modern great lettering? First, let's see Chris Dickey's. One of the things that I look for is that it blends in stylistically with the art. Let me show you some of this here. Like this art doesn't have a lot of black in the black line. So the lettering balloons are like a light brown. So the only black in the lettering balloon is the actual letters itself. And the font itself is a little wavy. So look how seamlessly if he had made a black outline on these balloons, they would stand out starkly from the art itself. What I look for in good lettering, well, there have to be the basics. The letter, it has to be legible. There's something called leading and line spacing. There has to be the right amount of space between letters so everything's legible. There has to be the right amount of space between lines so it's legible. But beyond that, there are so many artistic styles these days. There are so many painted books, digitally painted books, this book, that book. That sort of old style black and white lettering doesn't work in every situation. It stands out like a sore thumb. I like the way he used the brown balloons on this and sort of little jagged edges, not sharp edges, because there's no sharp edges in the art. So I think the letterer really has to think about these days what the art looks like and sort of match their lettering style to the art, which is why letterers these days have different fonts, have different balloon styles and different stuff like that. In the old days, you had to do that all by hand. In the old days, you didn't have to worry, though, about the lettering standing out from the artwork because it's in a different style. You had to worry about other things. But nowadays, I think that's the biggest thing to me, is making your lettering blend in, hence the hidden art. Mm-hmm. That's what we're talking about. You have anything to add to that, Wilson?
No, you pretty much captured it right there. Yeah. That you're
because I've seen books where they use sort of old school lettering with a black outline, and there's no black lines in the artwork. It just jumps out at you like, ooh.
Yeah, it depends on who you're working for and what you're doing. Because sometimes, I do a lot of lettering. The lettering that I do, a lot of the books are licensed projects. So something like Loud House from Nickelodeon, they have a style guide that I have to follow.
Right.
So there are certain things that it's like I can't get too crazy with it. Loud House is designed to look like a comic book. As weird as it sounds. If you ever watch the animated series, they love the language of comics. So when it's in a comic book format, they want it to be as comic book like as possible. And a lot of the illustration that is done is also done by the animators, from what I understand, where they're doing a comic book format in a comic book. As weird as that sounds, but it's one of those things where, you can go a little crazy, but then again, you still have to follow a style guide. So something like that is almost, it's almost like you just have to follow that guide. Where other books, again, it really depends on what it is. I've done a lot of translating of books, the Japanese stuff, the manga, where you have to work within their own parameters. Their own balloons are already drawn on the page. And because of the way the fonts are, or the way the lettering is, you don't have that much room. So it's kind of like you have to do the lettering for manga in such a way that it's not distracting. Same thing with the sound effects, especially in manga, because they're usually left in as the Japanese lettering of the sound effects, because it's incorporated so much into the artwork that we have to create a font or create a sound effect that is a translation of the big sound effect, but has to blend in with it. So there is that, I keep saying the hidden art of it, because you need to notice it only to be able to read what it says and then move on with it. And then when you get an artsy book where you can get to play around with it, those have become so much more fun, because then you search for a font that works with the artwork and that works with and the best way you described it. Sometimes people will just go with a regular black and white balloon that pops out too much. That Fantastic Four book you showed before, that could easily fall into that problem of that, because it's not inked, not traditionally, that the balloons and the word balloons and the text itself has to be a certain way. And sometimes, depending on the project, and depending how much of the word count is, it's finding that right font that could be easily read, but be able to put in all that Claremont writing into it.
Mm-hmm.
You have that type of thing going on too. And really, depending on the writer you work with, they may give you balloon placements. 9 times out of 10, I don't even see balloon placements anymore.
Yeah.
And I prefer the balloon placements.
And for those who don't know what balloon placements are, how it used to go in comics is working the Marvel method. The pencils would get back to the would get back into the office, and the writer would write it, and somebody would they'd throw a sheet of tracing paper over the original artwork, or else sometimes they'd do it in Xerox size too, and they'd actually draw where the script goes. They'd be like, oh, balloon 1 is he. Someone would have to balloon the artwork. Sometimes an editor, sometimes the writer, sometimes an assistant editor. So he'd take the script, he'd take the pencils, and he'd draw where the balloons go for the letterer. So the letterer now knows, oh, look, he'd put balloon 1 in brackets on the script, and he'd draw balloon 1 on the actual Xerox of the comic and send it to the letterer. So the letterer didn't have to decide where the balloons went. The letterer wasn't the one who was breaking up the script and deciding where the balloon goes. I think some letterers did that, but they usually didn't.
Right. And I prefer to get balloon placements only because you do have some writers write a lot and not realize how little space there is.
That used to be standard that you get. Ballooning a book would be a task that editorial had to do. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the writer liked to do that.
Right, because this way here, they could change it on the fly.
Right.
Because there have been projects that I've done and go, I'm pretty good, but I don't have any room here. And sometimes you go back to the editor and they'll make slashes on it. And it's like, I know I'm not going to be the one to make that decision, what to cut out, what to leave in. And sometimes you would need the writer to go back and go, okay, this is what it should be changed, because sometimes I don't know if they're looking at the artwork and realize there's not going to be enough space.
Yes, I was struck by the lettering in American flag. As I recall, Chaikin wanted the lettering to enhance his art. Yeah, he worked well. What's it? Ken Brunizak?
I don't know who.
I don't know if I've got the letters right in his last name. I forget. His name was like Ken Brunizak. He lettered American flag, and Chaikin he and Chaikin worked together to make it, typography as much as lettering. Mm-hmm. He was like integrating the lettering into the artwork. He became a very.
I think those online AI art generators are actually good for writers to test the balloon placement.
They can have the AI draw it and see what they can fit in there. There's great lettering, and there's lettering artistic spotlight, like Todd Klein's and Sandman. Yeah. Sometimes they make the lettering part of the storytelling. Look at the Dave Sims lettering in Cerebus. For him, the lettering was part of the artwork. My old boss told me once that his first Arctic excavation, he was housed with an elder Inuit woman, and all she fed him was pre-frozen Big Macs because she thought that's all white people eat. A little taste of home. I was just looking at the lettering in this, and this is the sort of type of lettering that only an auteur can do. A cartoonist who's controlling his own lettering. It's like he went without balloons. As you can see here, he sort of left space at the top, and there's a phantom balloon there. But it's like you couldn't do. This is something you do when you're the letterer over your own work. You can go without balloons. And I think this might be hand lettering, but I'm not 100% sure. Because there's some because it looks pretty perfect in places, but it also looks like there's some variation in the letters, which I think you can do now on the computer. You can like hit an A and have it pick one of 5 random A's.
It depends if the font was set up that way.
Yes, the font has to be set up that way. Mm-hmm. To make something look a little more hand lettered. But yeah, this has some interesting lettering. The book tour.
Yeah, and this year's Eisners, there are a bunch of letterers that I know. As you mentioned, Pat Rizzo.
Like I said, this is the first time he's ever been nominated for anything.
Well, and Pat's been on there for a long time.
Yeah, he's been around for ages.
Chris Dickey, as you mentioned.
Right.
Todd Klein. He's been nominated many times. And won, too, I think. Nick, who we were just talking about his book. Stan Sakai for Yazaki Ojimbo.
Yeah, he gets nominated a lot, too.
And Thomas Woodruff. Fanographic books.
I don't know. Nate Picos. I've been meaning to buy his book. Let's see. I also got the latest No One, issue 3. Kyle Higgins and Brian Buccellato. With the artist is Geraldo Borges. Colorist Mark Englert. And the letter is Hassan Atsami Elaho. Too many. But it's a superhero / crime procedural. Though maybe more likely a supervillain / crime proceed. And there's also I haven't listened to it at all, a podcast that goes with it. As I guess the podcast is trying to figure out who's doing the crime too. There's our lineup of suspects. But I've been enjoying this one. It takes place in the Massive Verse, which is the Radiant Black, Rogue Sun, Image universe. And good. Like I said, you don't see a lot of stuff that's sort of police procedural based in comics, but this one is. Good stuff. Let's see, what else do I have here?
I think you have to go back to the golden age for police procedurals. I think
a lot of Crime Does Not Pay.
Golden age stuff did that. Although I never read those books, so I don't know how procedural they were.
Crime Does Not Pay was around for a lot of issues. Mm-hmm. It amazed me when I saw that I think I have some digital copies of that, but nothing physical.
Well, there was that one shot from DC, Lady Cop.
A classic.
There's a new DC comic called Danger Street, and they use all of those.
The ding
they use all of those one-shot characters from first issue special, right, including Lady Cop.
The Dingbats of Danger Street. I almost bought the model sheet for that once. Maybe 10 years ago on eBay. They had it was the original 11x17. Jack Kirby drew it, and I don't know how many Dingbats of Danger Street there were, 8 or 6 of them across. I think my top bid was $500, which was more than I can afford. And it went for like $520 or something like that. I mean, who knows how high that guy would have gone.
Right.
But I was like, oh well, missed out on that. At least I bid on it.
You're part of the history.
Yeah, Dingbats of Danger. It was a nice Kirby piece, Now it probably goes for a lot more than that because original art has shot up in price. Which also brings us to something I didn't know. I'll show this to. I got this book this week, according to Jack Kirby. And its basic thesis is, I've only gotten a little bit into it, though its basic thesis is, why don't we believe Jack Kirby? Stan Lee's story has changed over the years so many times, but everybody believes him about the creation of the Marvel Universe. Jack Kirby's story hasn't changed over the years, but everybody says Jack's exaggerating and jealous and this and that. And so he goes through, it's all footnoted. So he goes through all these interviews and testimony from the 2011 depositions that everybody had to take, and the case that almost went to the Supreme Court. So it's real. And one of the things, speaking of that I didn't know, was an example of it here, is when Jack Kirby created something, he made a model sheet, like a pin-up model sheet for it that other ones are known of. Let me see if I can find it. Can't really see it. There is OMAC. So he would do these pin-up sheets explaining everything. That's what he would do when he created a character. And Jim Shooter testified in 2011 at the Supreme Court thing that he saw Jack Kirby's model sheet for Spider-Man. And he described it. It was nothing like Steve Ditko's Spider-Man. It had this, it had that. He's like, I saw it back when. So it existed. And there's also a part in here that someone's talking about, like I said, and they're trying to establish. It was funny. I was talking to that guy Darren, who I mentioned before, who I was talking to in the comic shop, who I haven't seen in 20. I was telling him about this book a little bit, and he's like, "Well, people have different stories when they ask you." I'm like, "There's different stories, and then there's the historical record. There's such a thing as historical method and the historical record, and what you do is you try to use evidence to figure out what happened. And the evidence is often people's testimony, especially as close to the time as possible. So that's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to get as close to the time as possible to people who were there and hear what everyone said. But one of the things I found, and they've also done analysis of stuff, like Paulo was talking about who wrote the Atlas stories in the 50s. Well, of course, it turns out Jack Kirby wrote most of his own stories because Stan Lee signed all the stories he wrote. Signed a couple he didn't too, but all the Jack Kirby stories are unsigned, and people say they think Jack Kirby wrote them because they've got Jack Kirbyisms in them. And so what was an interesting too, which that guy was talking about how when he made up these model sheets, he often would plot out the origin in the first couple of issues. And someone pointed out, I'd have to look up where it is, how Jack Kirby's comic The Shield, which is a character from the late 50s, how the first 3 issues of The Shield are mirrored in the first 3 issues of Spider-Man. The plots are very similar. So their speculation is that maybe in Jack Kirby's model sheet, he actually plotted the first 3 issues of Spider-Man, and they used some elements from it. So I found that interesting. I'd never heard of that before. I'd also never heard of, here's another something that makes sense. They were talking, according to Don Heck, Where's that one? In the 60s, whenever you saw a Kirby cover with like a clean shot of just the villain or something like that, in the early 60s, that was because Jack Kirby would design the villains, and the way they got him paid for that was they'd turn it into a cover. I was like, oh, that's it. I mean, that sounds perfectly plausible because, and I assume Stan was one doing that, because Jack Kirby was getting no money for designing anything. We know he designed the characters in the books, but he wasn't getting paid for that. And he designed villains. So the way they got him paid was they'd take that character design and turn it into a cover and pay him for the cover.
Yeah, remember the cover to Tales of Suspense number 39? They introduce Iron Man. So you have the pin-up shot, but right. You also have that Stan Lee-ism of who, but that's those pictures that are like Kirby describing how Tony Stark puts on the armor.
Right. That was part of the character design, probably. Yes, I found that a little bit of interesting. So this is full of little bits of interesting insight like that.
What is the full name of that book? Because I want to order it.
According to Jack Kirby, but it's print on demand. You can only get it on Lulu.com. Michael Hill is the author. Cost me $20 for the book, $7 for shipping and tax, I think it was. So. But it was one of those I ordered before I had the chance. Somebody in the People's History of Comic, I think Michael Hill might be on there or something, posted this book just came out and was on Lulu, and I was like, oh, I better order this before it came out in 2021, I think it's. I'm like, I better order this before I think the better of it, because that's what I always do. I'm like, do I really want to pay $27 for this? And I always end up saying, nah, I'll get it some other time. But I actually got it this time. Oh, and he's got things like this. I just flipped to this page. Monster Story Writing Credit Timeline. 1974. Lee lays claim to writing Jack Kirby's monster stories. And there's a footnote where you can go look up where he said that. 1989. Lee explicitly corrects him. 1994. Kirby dies. 1994. Lieber says, no, it was him. I assume that's Larry Lieber. 1998. Lee and Thomas agree Lee wrote Fing Fang Foom. 1999. Michael Vassallo proves Lee signed none of them.
Yeah.
Which means he did. And you'll find a lot. There's a Roy Thomas quote on the back that says, I don't get paid enough to have to deal with people like you. That's the Roy Thomas quote. And Roy Thomas comes across as more of a jerk. So far, there was one letter that the author was like, and Roy Thomas sent me this letter. Where's the letter? In 2013, Roy Thomas sent a brutally condescending letter to comic book creator in response to John Cook's first issue article, Kirby's Kingdom. Thomas laid out the whole case against Kirby, entirely based on the alleged plotting. And this is now Roy Thomas. You made the mistake that a lot of rank amateur analysts make, even though you are obviously not one of those. And assuming that if an artist draws pictures which tell a story, then writes out margin notes which clarify points and suggest dialogue to go with that, necessarily means that the artist made up the story out of whole cloth, that he was not given any directions beforehand as to what the story was. You cannot honestly and reasonably assume that simply because there's no paper trail of a plot from Stan Lee, ... And then here he says, Roy Thomas says something about people who weren't there shouldn't make claims. And then he said, then the author was, as he admits, Thomas was no more present than Cook during the Kirby Lee story conferences. I was like, despite all his bluster, he wasn't there either. But interesting book so far. Like I said, they've got footnotes, and you can go look up exactly where all the quotes came from. So I find that he's actually trying to use the historical record to figure out what happened.
Mm-hmm. And for a lot of characters, there's been a lot of work done figuring out the forensics of where the especially Kirby, of where the stories come from.
And here's something I didn't know. No wonder Marvel settled. Kirby's kids were there when Kirby was creating stuff, and he showed it to them. Mm-hmm. There's something that especially rings true for me because I see it all on one of the people I follow on Twitter is this guy who goes around correcting people's wrong history, and he's not in comics, just in general history. And one of the things that not only he but everyone always points out was that Vikings didn't have horns on their helmets. Despite their depiction in popular culture over the years, Vikings never wore horn. Very rarely, we should say. I'm sure there was a Viking here or there with horned helmets. But Vikings, it was not part of Viking style to have horns on your helmet.
Nope.
And when Kirby was creating Thor, he showed it to his son, who immediately said, "Dad, there's not supposed to be horns on Viking helmets." Mm-hmm. And his dad, and he said, then my father explained to me the difference between history and making something eye-catching for a comic book. It's like, and he said, that's also what the big circles were for on Thor's shirt, because no Vikings ever wore big circles on their shirt.
And but those aren't big circles. That's actually armor. No, it is. Those are metallic.
Oh, yeah, you're right. But he also... I then remember, because we all know Thor ended up without the horns on his helmet.
He has wings. Yeah, because they're Celtic.
Young Thor in Tales of Asgard had horns on his helmet, if I remember correctly.
That was Loki had horns. Okay. Here's the thing: if you're a warlord and you're not in battle, you may have a decorative helmet with bigger horns than everybody else, so that anyone can see that you're the boss. Mm-hmm. That's why you have the bigger horns.
Right.
Of course, you're not taking that to battle because they're not practical.
Mm-hmm.
But you can. It's just that you're not wearing them in battle. The thing is, Thor is always dressed the same way. So, but the thing is, those wings aren't. They're not. They don't get in the way that much. So.
Right. But I never knew Kirby's kids all had stories about the creations of these characters because they were there and he was showing them to them. And they even said that he had like all the because Kirby was always taking stuff from other places too. And he had all the books on Norse mythology in his studio, and his kids would come down and read the books too while he was drawing. So they knew all the places he got the stuff from. Mm-hmm. Because they were the books in his library.
Yeah. Roz used to. Roz said that she was the one who had to drive Kirby everywhere.
Right.
Because he would start plotting a comic in his head, and then he would forget where he was. He just kept driving.
Right.
And he got lost.
Mm-hmm.
So you would plot, and you would talk to her while she was driving. And then she would. She was already talking about 4 years down the line.
And they were talking about the Kirby Stan Lee plotting sessions. And guess what? No one was there but Kirby and Stan Lee.
John Romita mentioned once that he was there.
He did, but that was later on. That was early on. John Romita also mentions a car ride, but the dispute on the car ride story, it has to do with it started out there's what do they call the famous article where Jack Kirby got mad because Stan Lee got all the credit in 1966. Mm-hmm. And Stan Lee, that was where the legend was born about Stan Lee acting out all the plots. But according to Jack Kirby and other people who were there, that was performative. Stan Lee was putting on a show for the reporter.
Yeah,
that's what he was doing. And they actually they interviewed someone here about the John Romita story, which was true, which is a story that Stan Lee and John Romita and Jack Kirby used to drive home to Long Island together. And he said at one time, John Romita heard them going over a plot, but the whoever was being interviewed in this, that could have been Stan Lee being performative too, because Jack Kirby used to take the day off, take the train into New York City, and then plot with Stan Lee in his office all day. He's like, I find it hard to believe that they waited till the ride home to do anything substantial in their plotting. It could have just been Stan Lee being performative for John Romita in the back, going over what they had already done all day, rather than Stan Lee coming up with a plot in the car on the way home after they had been working all day.
Okay. Did John Romita ever explain how it worked when he was drawing Spider-Man?
Yeah, he'd have to come up with the plots. Yeah, he's explained that. He plotted Spider-Man. He was just talking about that in the book I'm reading about John Romita, that is Kickstarted now, that I was quoted in something. But yeah, I didn't realize till much later on that John Romita was plotting those Spider-Mans on his own. He always said that was the hardest part, having to come up with the plots for him. Well, Stan Lee was not coming up with the plots, even then. But an interesting book so far. What do we have here? Modern crime is no good for comics. 90% of the investigation is computer tech stuff. Yeah. Thor and Dr. Jones. One plays with lightning, the other plays with bones. It's song from the Big Bang Theory. I get most of my work done on the way home. I get no work done on the way home, let me tell you that.
Yeah, I've already tried. I can't.
Yeah. Nope, not at all. But good book, recommended. If you want to spend $27 on it to get it print on demand on Lulu, it's good so far. I'm enjoying it. I'm already learning stuff. Like, I'm going to go back and look up this in this article for the New York Herald Tribune. They're talking about the plotting session that was going on in this article. And Chris Tolworthy, whoever that is, there's a little number 9. Let me see if I can tell you who he is, just so you know. Where is that? Chris Tolworthy emailed to the author in June 20. I guess he's just a friend of the author's. Remember, this alleged plotting session must have been for Fantastic Four 59, based on the content and the date. I assume they talk about the plotting session in this article. That's why I have to read the article and see. Just 5 issues after the most famous Fantastic Four story ever, featuring the intro of Stan Lee's all-time favorite character, the one he would not let anybody else write. The story climaxes with the Silver Surfer being exiled on Earth. That was the whole. I assume that's Fantastic Four 55 ends up with the Silver Surfer being exiled on Earth from the context of this. I remember him being exiled on Earth. I don't remember the issue. That is the whole point of the Surfer's character. He is an alien trapped on Earth and must therefore learn about us and be horrified by our madness. But Lee thinks the Surfer spends his time out in space after a battle with Galactus. I assume that's in the plotting session in the article. Lee does not know the first thing about the story he claimed to write, or the first thing about the characters. As soon as Lee opens his mouth, he proves he's doing exactly what Thomas denies he's doing, trying to grab the credit away from Kirby. I find that interesting. Lee didn't even know talking about the plot to Jack in the article, didn't even know what ended up in the story, because I've told this story before, but I'm going to tell it again just because. This is my copy of Son of Origins of Marvel Comics from, I probably got it when I was 10, 11 years old, and I loved these. I loved these Stan Lee introductions because I loved a glimpse behind the scenes. But I even went to look for it today, and I have it marked. Here's the line that 11-year-old Jared couldn't figure out what was going on. This is Stan Lee. After we discussed the plot for, are you ready for this? The Galactus trilogy. Stan's just impressed with the fact that it has a name. That's all that is. That he didn't make up, but he's impressed by the fact that everybody else thinks it's important. Jack spent the next few weeks drawing the first 20-page installment. When he brought it to me so that I could add the dialogue and captions, I was surprised to find a brand new character floating around the artwork. There's the line that gets me, too. A silver-skinned, smooth-domed, sky-riding surfer atop a speedy flying surfboard. When I asked old Jackson who he was, Jack replied something to the effect that a supremely powerful gent like Galactus, a godlike giant who roamed the galaxies, would surely require the services of a herald who could serve to him as advance guard. Now you can imagine 11-year-old Jared reading this and going, how can the writer of a comic not know what's in the comic? I was like, that makes no sense to me. But the line that made me able to figure out is when he describes it, he says, a brand new character floating around the artwork. Now, to my 11-year-old brain, like I said, I never read the Galactus trilogy. I had no access to it. So I was like, oh, the Silver Surfer, when he must have first appeared, must have been an incidental character. Like, I could picture him floating around Galactus, like didn't say anything, didn't do anything. It was just a little character here and there that Stan noticed in the background and brought to the foreground. That's how I figured it must have happened. Until 1979, when I got my hands on a reprint of the Galactus trilogy. For anyone who's never read it, the first issue isn't a character floating around the artwork. The whole starts with the end of an Inhuman story, and then the whole story is built around the Silver Surfer. There's where we first see the Silver Surfer, and then he's on the next page. Then we get a whole other page. He's not a little character floating around. The story's built around him. So that's when I realized, that here he is too on the next page is the thing. I was like, Stan just made that all up. Stan is bullshitting me. So 12-year-old Jared with these two books figured out that you couldn't take Stan Lee's stories at face value. When he said he has a bad memory and he likes to take credit for everything that's not nailed down, which is in these books too somewhere. I'll have to find that. He wasn't lying. He was. This is what made me realize when I was 12 that Stan Lee could not be trusted, despite his image of beloved, lovely. You could not trust what he said, because there's no way for a writer to not know what's in the story he wrote unless he's not the writer. That was my conclusion at 12, and it's still my conclusion. He's the co-writer.
He's the scripter.
Mm-hmm. But he's not the writer. But that jibes with this guy's observation of their plotting session that the reporter was seeing ended up being completely different than what was in the comic. So I found that interesting.
Going back to the Atlas story, the Atlas Monster stories.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I really want is the first Stan Lee credits on those monster stories are on Ditko stories.
Yeah.
But they don't start appearing till 1960. 61. So the first monster stories that Ditko drew, and Ditko usually drew the last story in the anthologies, because he was also drawing for Charlton. So that's why his output at Marvel was not as big as Kirby's. They're not credited, and I'd like to read the Charlton stories to see if the Atlas story, if the Marvel stories are kind of similar. I know that Ditko came up with the plots. Right. He would draw the story and give it to somebody else to dialogue. He wouldn't dialogue a story.
Right.
But we know that Joe Gill wrote the majority of the Charlton story, the Charlton stories that Ditko drew. So maybe the early ones were also by Joe Gill. It does have some Atlas credits in the second half of the 50s. So
one of the things that they mentioned in this too, stylistically, especially about the very early Marvel days, was that Jack Kirby, as a writer, it was his style to do the stories in chapters. That was not Stan Lee's style.
Yeah.
So a lot of that early stuff was done and you can see the chapters in the monster books.
The only thing that I imagine Stan Lee telling Kirby then, okay, the main monster story, instead of 6 pages, now it's 13.
Yeah.
Okay, also, 13-page story.
Talking about Stan Lee's story ever changing, his final story in the 2011 deposition for the court case was that he created everything without input from Kirby and Ditko. And anytime he ever said they were co-creators, he was just trying to be nice to them. That was his final under oath story.
There's a Jerry Bales fanzine in 1963 where he said, well, I got on the phone to Stan Lee, and he told me, oh, I just got a new character that Steve Ditko created called Doctor Strange. I wasn't expecting it. That was in 1963.
And you know, the only reason Ditko is credited with that is because that exists. Mm-hmm. People don't dispute that Ditko came up with Doctor Strange on his own because of that Jerry Bales fanzine. If that wasn't there, people would be saying Stan Lee was a co-creator of Doctor Strange. Mm-hmm. That's what I find amazing.
I think they do on the Doctor Strange movie.
Yeah, they still do at times. Let's see. The last 2 books I got this week were Ice Cream Man number 35 with this rather lame cover.
What's still going on?
I don't know. It's like supposed to be a picture book of some kind, so they put it in a frame, and it just doesn't do anything for me. It's the Book of Necessary Monsters, and this is one of these books that, once again, and the beginning of it, I wasn't into it, but by the end of it, I was, kind of thing, because it's about this guy who. Ice Cream Man is an anthology of horror these days. So this is about this guy who's writing a book of necessary monsters. He's writing a book of more important than the Bible and the Quran and everything else. The book yet. So, and some of it is text about just monsters. The earworm. You know, the earworm is the song that gets in your ear. I'm like, it's an actual monster. I'm like, shameful memory. It was just like mundane stuff. But then as it went on, it got more interesting. And finally, the end was actually interesting. And I'm like, did he make that beginning mundane on purpose?
Maybe.
Maybe. But it was like, I wasn't interested in the beginning, but by the end I was. And I was like, because being an anthology, some issues I really like. Some issues can be clunkers. And this kind of was looking like a clunker, but then I liked it. So I was like, yeah, I find that an interesting sort of process. And the other one I got is Dark Ride, about the horror Disneyland by the Birthright guys, Williamson and Bresson. And they continue to, I mean, it's good stuff. It's They continue to explore this world with the trash guy in the bottom of the theme park. They continue to explore this horror theme park and what it meant. And the son has been running it. His father was one who made a deal with demons or something to make this park, and the son knows nothing about it. And there's crazy stuff going on at this horror theme park. So, good book, good horror book. But man, I had a wide variety of stuff, from rereading stuff to textbook to old comics.
Gorvidal's in the chat explaining the cover to the Ice Cream Man.
Ah, okay. Let's see. There's an homage to George Luis Borges books. Okay. Kirby spending 3 weeks on anything can only mean the year had 200 weeks. Yeah. Book of Imaginary Beings. All right. Was Stan Lee capable of writing Silver Surfer Parable? I don't know.
Okay, if you take just a little glance at Silver Surfer Parable, you'll notice that thing has Mobius written all over it. Yeah. It looks like something that was planned out. It's like it's a regular heavy metal story that Mobius drew. The story beats they flow like a heavy metal story, not like a Marvel story.
Jared, did you use your new art supplies? Painted on one canvas, used some of my markers. What else did I get? I'm trying to remember that whole big order now. The 3 markers I showed last week, I threw away. They were so bad. The Soho black markers. I started using, this is one of my new favorite black pens. I got a bunch of these. The Micron 12s. Big tip. We think of microns, as small tips, but this is a pretty big tip.
Yeah, that's a big one.
That's a big, and I already refilled it with ink because I ran it out. But yeah, I've been using a bunch of the supplies, not all of them. What else did I get? There was some stuff I get I must not have used. Like I still have 5 canvases. I only used one of them. And like I used most of the I reset up my my whole mark. Oh, over here is all my markers. Let me see if I can show them. I don't know if I can. There's all my markers on the side. Whoops! Knocked my speaker over. But I had to rebuild this shelf off to the side, which I did. Knocked my speaker right off its stand. It's wired in, so I keep forgetting that. My hands smell like Tuscan honey. For anyone who missed it earlier, we had hand cream minute as my new hand cream was delivered. It's funny, the other one I have, hand cream I have, another one, which doesn't have a name except Camille, smells just like Dove soap. I don't know if you've ever used Dove soap before. Regular Dove soap. It smells just like it. I'm like, I don't know what that smell is supposed to be, but the other one I got is French vanilla, which is the best smelling vanilla hand cream I've smelled. That's the one that got me to check out the brand. Remember what Comic Crack said, Paulo? Use your hand cream. You got to be able to crack those safes. Sensitive fingertips.
Vanilla is supposed to be the smell that we get from old comic books.
Ah, okay. I did not know that.
When books in general break down, they say that the main smell most people will describe as being vanilla.
Okay.
So that's how you bottle the smell of comic books. It's
vanilla.
just
Well, I have another brand, like a one I got in the supermarket that's supposed to be vanilla, and it doesn't smell anything like vanilla. It's like cheap supermarket hand lotion sometimes is like,
right.
It's supposed to smell like lemons, but I've never smelled a lemon anything like this. New to me. The book tour. It's funny, I've got books I haven't read yet I picked something up and reread it. I finally started Black Science. I read the first issue in it, so I'm going to have to read that one over the upcoming weeks. That's the one that's 43-issue omnibus that I got.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Sometimes it's hard to start something that big.
Yeah, because it's just a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The book tour was much smaller. I wonder if they have this. Do you have a print? I wonder if there's a print-on-demand service that could get Paulo this. Because you wouldn't want to ship it across the ocean.
No. That would be more expensive than the book itself.
Right. Does Lulu have a European affiliate, I wonder?
It's possible. When I was on the website, it did request where I was located, what language I prefer, stuff like that in general. So I'm wondering if they may have something set up.
Look at Lulu.com. They're the print-on-demand service that printed this book. The printing on the cover isn't that good. It's a little blurry. Printing inside is fine.
Well, you can order. Oh man, this is what they call volume discounts. 100 to 499 copies, 5% off. No, my son. 40% off. Okay. It's like these guys don't know. Have never tried to sell in bookstores.
They probably haven't.
For these types of values, I want to be the exclusive importer, and I want 70% off cover price.
Yeah, print on demand stuff is too many hands. It's like there is no print on demand is expensive, and actually, it's just that the margins are thin for who's ever publishing it. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you can give volume discounts to books.
I can get self-publishing here.
Yeah.
Because then Lulu just takes a cut from to pay for the printing costs.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're trying to sell, and this is what they call bulk discounts, 5% off up to 499 copies, 10% off up to 999, and 15% off for 1,000 plus. This would require me to be a regional distributor importer, which means that in order to get some market share, I need a contract saying that I have the exclusive.
Right.
And I need more. I mean, 15% for 1,000 copies. Nobody in the printing industry would be able to work with
that doesn't leave any money for the retailer.
Right. Because there's a reason the retailer wants to keep 50% of the price, because they have no idea that if they can move the book or not.
Right.
And they have to pay to ship it back if it doesn't sell.
No.
Your PDF option?
No, not that I saw. There was no digital option. Otherwise, I would have got it, because I read most of my books. I read almost all of my books digitally these days. I shouldn't even say most. In terms of books with not comic books, but books, actual bookie books.
So even if for Europe they have a printer and distributor here, which doesn't look like, from what I can see from the website, doesn't mention it anywhere, so I don't believe it. even if that were we had that, if they had a distributor in Europe with prices like this, especially because the sales tax here is stupidly high.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should sign off for the night. Everyone have a good week out there.
Thanks for stopping by.
And we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.